Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I am really excited to be here today, and I don't know how many participants we're going to have, but I'm excited to speak to anyone and everyone who's here. This is a passion of mine, and prior to everything closing down and locking down, it was the primary thing that I did all the time was conducting workshops on communication and linguistic styles and things like that. So I do love this and am very excited to be here. So thank you very much. All right.
James,
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
excited for you to speak to us today because I think what you have to teach us is going to be able to help in so many different areas of life, from parenting to professional life to relationships. So thank you so much on behalf of Youth and Family Services for joining us today. And would you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I am 40 years old. I have a 14-year-old son named Jace who is currently enrolled here locally in school. And I have been professionally speaking in some capacity since I was in my early 20s. And I have devoted myself to trying to wrap my mind around whatever concept I get fascinated with. I try to not say obsessed with, but the truth is I do have a tendency, being neurodivergent and being on the spectrum, I have a tendency on subjects to get really involved and go really deep into them whenever I start to see something, patterns and things like that. And with communication, I really started to notice some patterns and some different nuances in language and the ways that people would communicate using body language, using posture, tonality, breathing, and then even especially with the linguistic style. So I went really deep on that, spent a few years educating myself on that, and then got to a point to where people were wanting me to teach what I had discovered to sales groups, communications experts, mental health care professionals, basically anybody trying to communicate a message with someone else or trying to listen and get a message clearly communicated to themselves. Those were the groups of people and individuals who asked me to come and speak on this subject.
Right. Well, if you'll just get us started with whatever methodology you prefer to
Sure.
tackle this
Yeah.
subject, but I'd love to learn more.
Well, thank you very much. And I typically do these workshops in big groups, so I do usually like a lot of feedback. So whatever you want to interject or whenever you have a question, please just chime in. That helps me out a bunch. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Initially, I would like to go ahead and start with a PowerPoint presentation, if that's okay. And
Great.
I right now am not able to share my screen. It says that the host has it disabled. So I'm not sure if we can fix that. Ms. Vasquez, are you still available? Uh-oh. She might have. Well, I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm afraid I may have to just deliver it, and you guys I may have to email it out to everyone else later. So what I wanted to do is what I always do whenever I start a workshop is I wanted to first start with setting a positive emotional or mental state. And what I do here is I'd like for you to imagine or recall a time in your life when you were truly proud of yourself. Maybe you accomplished something great, achieved a goal, graduating from something, finishing a race first, baking the perfect cake, whatever it is that mattered most to you, and it was accomplished, you did it well, and I'd just like for you to connect with that moment and really be there. Take a moment and just remember the smells, remember how it sounded, remember what it looked like. If you can, remember the clothing you were wearing. Remember any sounds in the room, anything, praises that you might have heard. Good job, congratulations, I'm proud of you, things like that. And just really meditate on those. And I want you to notice how it begins to make you feel on the inside, whether it makes you start to feel like you have this brightness or kind of this lifting in your chest or things like that. And what I'd like you to do is, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, whatever intensity that is, just try to turn it up just a little bit and just try to feel that more. And whenever you think about how that feels, no matter what it's like, just increase it and just turn it up just a little bit. And what I'd like for you to do is notice how it makes you feel whenever you can accomplish something, whenever you can grasp onto a concept and you can really do it well. Because that's which direction we're going to come at this subject from. No matter if you're an expert communicator or this is your first time, what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to go from a mentality that you can achieve great things, you can accomplish something, and if you really commit yourself to this, you can become a better listener and a better communicator in just a few minutes of practice every single day. So if you're ready to do that, I'd like to go ahead and do that now, if that's okay. Awesome. So why are we here? How many of these have we sat through and just kind of biding our time, wondering how this is going to apply to me? I know I've done it, been involved with several of these types of workshops and things like that, where it's like, oh man, I've got to sit through this and I don't even know how this applies to me. I know it's supposed to be good. Well, that's what I'd like for us to go ahead and set the stage for first, is how does this apply to me? And so what I'd like for you to do is take out a sheet of notebook paper, or if you're in front of a computer, I'd like you to go ahead and open up a Word document or some way that you can do a text and write out and type something out. And what we're going to do is basically we're going to have two columns, one on the left side and one on the right side. So if you want to draw a line down the middle of a piece of paper, or if you want to make two separate columns on your computer screen. But what I'm going to do is in a minute, I'm going to give you 90 seconds. And what I'd like for you to do is to type or to write out a specific negative situation occurring in your life right now that you are here to improve. And that you think that communication, bettering your communication either through listening or how you speak to another person and convey a message, how improving in that area can help you. But first, I want you to focus on what negatively are you experiencing right now? What is something that you have going on in your life and you'd like it to change? And I'm going to start the timer right now. 90 seconds. All right, that's about 30 seconds, about a third of the way there. Going to give everybody a little bit more time here. All right, that's 60 seconds. Got about 15 seconds left. All right. Now, I'd like you to just kind of shake that off. If there were any negative emotions that you experienced while writing that down, what I'd like you to do is kind of just let that just go, like a wind just rushes through, and just let it just breeze on by. And what I'd like you to do now is take another 90 seconds, and on the right-hand side, we're going to completely do the antithesis of what we just did. We're going to take 90 seconds, and we're going to type or write out specifically what it's going to look like, what it's going to sound like, and what it's going to feel like when we have the opposite, the positive situation occurring in our life, the exact opposite. And I want you to state it as positively as you can, what you do want, not a restatement of what you don't want. Okay, so if I were to say, don't imagine a black cat running across the screen, what happens? We imagine a black cat running across the screen. So if you start to think about what you don't want, that's going to be the only thing that you're able to generate. So what I want you to do is focus on what you do want. Focus positively stated, what do I want? What would it look like? What would it sound like? And what would it feel like if I had the complete opposite? And I want you to take 90 seconds and write that down or type that out. Nearing up on 60 seconds.
Sorry, I can't help you with that on Apple Watch.
About 10 seconds. All right, so that's about 90 seconds. And if you need a few seconds to finish up, no problem whatsoever. Now, I want you to take a good look at that and make sure that you reread it to yourself and make sure that that's correct, because right now, what you're doing is your mind is connecting the end goal, the end result of, while watching this, the entire process of learning this and educating yourself on communication. Your brain is going to be attaching to that end goal, trying to apply this technique and these types of skills to that end goal. So I want you to make sure that that is accurate and that's correct for just a second. And if it's not, go ahead and pause this video and rewrite it out. You can always catch up with us in the next 90 seconds. All right, we're going to go ahead and continue on. Now, so I'm going to make it really clear. We've got a 4-step process that I like to implement in order for us to successfully develop a more positive method of understanding others and clearly communicating our message to others. And the first thing we want to do is create a well-formed outcome. We just started on that by saying what we do want and what we'd like to occur in our lives. So what we're going to do is make sure that that's crystal clear. And I use something called the PURE method to do that. And we're going to do that together. And it's PURE. And we will focus on that next. And we'll go into that in a little more detail on the next step. After we do that, we're going to focus on active listening. The first thing we want to do is be able to listen and understand before we try to communicate, because quite often the message that we think is important to communicate can actually turn into something that's counterproductive, or a message that doesn't even need to be communicated in a certain situation, just because we haven't paid attention and stopped and listened to what somebody else is saying. And oftentimes the message that we want to convey isn't necessarily even important to the situation. So listening is by far the most important component of communication. So the first thing we want to do is focus on active listening. And the way that we do that is by noting language patterns, or focusing on the way that others process the world around them using their senses. Another label for this is called sensory modalities. Some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners, some people are kinesthetic learners, and others are internal dialogue learners. And there are, we all kind of use all of these different senses to learn, but quite often we'll notice that we have either one or two primary senses that we like to rely on as our primary way of understanding the world around us. And quite often that'll come through our language patterns. And we'll talk more about that in the next section as well. The third thing we want to do is focus on developing sensory acuity. That's also considered emotional intelligence by quite a few other experts. Another person might say I'm an empath, or I'm empathetic. These are all ways of basically saying the same thing. Emotional intelligence, sensory acuity. what you're going to want to do is focus on not obsessive focus. Some people do, but you want to focus on learning how to read micro expressions, breathing patterns, posture, and different things like that, so that you can start to get a grasp on not necessarily what someone is saying, but also what they're conveying to you with their body and with their breathing and with their tone and things like that. So that's the third step. And all of these steps take a little bit of time. I believe that we're going in order of importance. We start with step 1, which is creating the well-formed outcome. We move into step 2, which is focusing on active listening. While we're doing that, we're also trying to develop our sensory acuity and emotional intelligence. And finally, we're going to learn a little bit about mirroring and matching and how that can develop a really good bond and rapport between two individuals, so that the other person feels like you're really understanding them through subtle body language mirroring and matching, tonal mirroring and matching, and even language mirroring and matching, which is kind of a fun thing to learn and experiment with. All right, so first thing we're going to do is create a well-formed outcome. Now on that same sheet of paper, what I'd like for you to do is go down a little bit lower, and we're going to make we're going to write out vertically P, U underneath it, R underneath the U, and then an E underneath the R. So it should look like P, U, R, E, vertically. Now next to the P, what we're going to write is positively stated. Next to the U, we're going to write under your control. Next to the R, we're going to write real. And then next to the E, we're going to write ecologically balanced. Okay, so this anagram is a really easy way of focusing your mind on what it is that you do want, instead of the negative effect of focusing on what you don't want. So anytime you're going to try to accomplish something, or anytime you are facing a situation that's giving you that negative feeling or this sense of self-doubt or insecurity, the first thing what I'd like you to do is focus on a pure model of creating a well-formed outcome or goal. So the first thing I'd like you to do is positively state what you do want, not what you don't want. In other words, if you say, I'd like to get into shape. A lot of people might say, well, what is it that's going on right now that you don't feel good about? Well, I'm overweight. I'm unhealthy. Well, what would you like instead? Well, I don't want to be overweight. I don't want to be unhealthy. What that person's just done is restated their problem. They restated exactly what it is they don't want. So what happens in the mind, you begin to visualize and relive what you don't want. So the first thing we've got to do is retrain our brain to focus on what we do want, positively stated, and not what we don't want. It's a very, very simple shift, but what it does is it begins to allow the brain and the mind to find resources to achieve that goal, rather than wallowing in that negative state that we find ourselves in from time to time. The next thing we want to do is make sure that this goal is under our control. In other words, nobody else, or our goal doesn't depend on anyone else. Our goal is dependent on our actions, our beliefs, our behaviors, and our self-belief. And that is the only thing that we focus on when we're developing these goals. Because there's nothing more frustrating than putting a goal out there for yourself to achieve, but it's reliant on somebody else supporting you, and then that other person doesn't support you. So whenever we make our goals, we want to make sure that they're under our control and not under someone else's. Okay? So what that looks like is, let's say you want to, I don't know, run a marathon, and you've never done that before. Well, you could say, well, I want to run a marathon, and I say, well, what do you have to do that? Well, I need to get up and I need to work out every morning. I need to run X amount of miles. Well, is that okay? Can you do that? Well, no, I can't do that because I have to sleep in until 9 because of X, Y, and Z. I work the night shift, whatever. And so we have to kind of rework it to where it's under their control. And once you put that goal under your control, you'll feel more empowered, and your brain won't find reasons to quit or to not achieve it. And so that's a really important aspect and element to get whenever we're forming well-formed outcomes. The next thing we want to do is make it real. So if I told you right now, currently I'm driving a 2010 Ford F-150, it's gray. If you don't know anything about that truck and you've never seen it, you've got a vague idea of what a truck looks like, but you don't know that truck, right? So if I start to describe it to you, well, it's a dark charcoal gray. It's got tinted windows. It's got 4 doors. It's the big one. It's got a V8 engine. It's got a black plastic grill on the front. It's got a bed liner, a plastic bed liner on the inside of it. As I begin to tell you more things, more visuals about it, that truck begins to be more clear. Well, then if I start to tell you even more how it sounds, it's got a deep rumble when I start it up. And whenever I really step on the gas, it'll shift down and boom, boom, and it'll do all that stuff. And it's got a real good stereo. It'll boom you out of there, right? Real cold, ice cold air conditioning, real hot heater, real nice. And it smells good too, because my fiance bought me an air freshener, and I hang it in there. It smells great. It's got that little smell of lemon, but also like ginger. I don't know. It's real nice, right? And so the more that I talk about this and the more I build up this truck, the more real it's becoming to you, right? So whenever we make our goals, we want to do the same exact thing. I want to know what it looks like. I want to know what it sounds like. And I want to know what it feels like whenever you get done with this. When you're on the other side of this and you've achieved that goal, I want it to be crystal clear. I want to hear everything about it. And I want to know exactly what that's going to look like. I want to be able to weigh it and put it on a scale, right? So that's the next thing we want to do, is we make it real. And so anytime we're making a goal, make it real. Make sure you can see, what does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What do I feel like when I'm there? All these things matter, okay? And finally, make sure it's ecologically balanced. In other words, is it okay if you achieve it? And I know this sounds crazy, but I can't tell you how many times somebody has come to me with a goal of something that seems like it's really healthy and it's a smart thing, but for whatever reason, for them in their lives, that goal is just not going to work. And one time I had a lady call me and wanted to hire me to help her quit smoking. We were going to use conversational hypnosis. She was really excited to do it. She said, her kids had been on her for years. It's time for her to quit. Now I don't know what your feelings are around this, but this was a goal for her. And normally, as long as I can't see any negative downside to it, my only goal is to help my clients achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So it doesn't matter to me whether or not you want to quit smoking or somebody else does. I only do what people hire me to help them achieve. As long as I can't see a negative side to it, they can't see a negative side to it, we try to work toward that goal. So she wanted to work toward that goal. I said, hey, is there anything about this goal, that's is negative? Because we got all the way through this, positively stated, under her control, real. We got down to ecologically balanced. I said, is there any reason why this would be a bad thing? And she said, no, I can't think of any reason. I said, well, is it going to negatively affect anybody else? And she was like, what? Oh, no. And her eyes dropped, and I knew immediately there's something here. And she said, well, every night whenever I get home from work, my husband and I, we go out on our back porch. We got this nice little sun deck. We sit out there. He has a nice little glass of scotch or whiskey. I have a little glass of wine. I smoke a cigarette. He smokes a cigar. This is what we do every night. Every night, this is what we do together. And she's like, I don't know if I can sit out there with him while he's smoking that cigar and not light up and not have a cigarette. Like, I just don't know if I have that type of willpower. And I said, well, why don't you talk to him about it and see what he thinks? And because I think we're done. Right now, if you don't see yourself on the other side of this problem and you can't see any way forward, right now we're at an impasse. We have to be able to accept the other side of this, right? So she went home, talked to her husband. I didn't hear from her. I thought, well, she doesn't want this anymore, and that's fine. And 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from her, and she said, guess what? I said, well, what? What's going on? She said, I'm down to smoking 1 cigarette a day. And I said, wow, how'd you accomplish that? And she said, I went home, talked to my husband. He said, I tell you what, why don't we only smoke when we get home from work? I'll only smoke a cigar with you then. I won't smoke anymore any other time. You don't smoke anywhere else. And that's like our treat. At the end of the day, we'll sit down, we'll do that together. And then if we ever decide we want to quit that, we can quit that too. For her, that was a solution. It worked. And so she went from smoking a pack and a half a day to smoking a cigarette a day. And she was extremely excited about that, super happy. And I was happy for her. She didn't even need me. We didn't even have to go through the process of the hypnosis, all she had to do was have a goal that was achievable, that was ecologically balanced, it was real, it was under her control, and it was positively stated. Once she accomplished that goal and could get that written down, she didn't even need me. So half the time, your solution can come from just using this pure model before you attack a challenge. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, send me an email or shoot me a question and I'll answer it. All right. So what do we start with? The first thing we want to do is we want to try to listen for other people's sensory modalities. So how are they experiencing the world around them? What are sensory modalities? Well, we talked about it. They're the senses, the five senses, right? Any of the relatively independent sensory systems such as vision, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. The traditional five senses were originally identified about 350 BC by the Greek philosopher Aristotle. Could have been anywhere between 384 to 322. So some of the sensory modalities and the language patterns that we have from time to time, we're going to focus on visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or internal dialogue. Now, one of the things that I did send to Ms. Vasquez was a worksheet that helps you identify your own. And if anybody would like that, I'm happy to share that with you. Is that something that you would like to have now and I can drop it in the chat? Or is that something that you'd like me to email to you later?
If you could drop it in the chat, that would be great.
Sure, no problem. Let me see if I can do that real quick. I'm going to pull it up from the email. That way you have the exact copy that I used. All right. All right, I've got it here. Let me just save it. And oh, I actually have the pure model as well here. I'm going to go ahead and drop both of those in here. Uh-oh, it won't let me drop from my computer. Hang on. Huh. Okay, I will have to figure this out because it's not letting me drop straight from my PC.
If you just want to email it to us, we could put it
Yeah.
on our Facebook page
Okay,
after.
perfect. Perfect. I'm happy to do that.
Can
Awesome.
use it. Thank you.
Perfect. And what that will do is it's just a self-assessment. There's no right or wrong answers, but what you'll be able to do is just look over 5 questions and rank in order how which words matter most to you. Whether and it won't tell you right away whether you're a visual learner, auditory, kinesthetic, or internal dialogue. You'll have to calculate it up, and at the end, the math will show you which type you are. So it's a self-assessment, 5 questions, and you just rank them from in order from 4 being the most like you, 1 is the least. So, and if you have any questions with that, anybody can email me. All right, so whenever we're talking about different linguistic patterns and styles, if someone is a visual thinker or learner, what are some of the types of words that you think would typically start to come out of their mouth whenever they're discussing anything?
I hear a lot of people use the word okay over and over.
Okay. Okay. Right. Yeah, that's in mostly in responsiveness. In like sure, okay, sure, okay, yeah. Right? What and so if they were, and I'm not sure what that might apply to, whenever you're explaining something to somebody, do you get a lot of I see what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 2 different modalities, right? I see what you're saying. Right? You might have someone say, I hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a visual thinker will say, I see what you're saying. An auditory thinker will say, I hear what you're saying. I hear you. A kinesthetic person would say something along the lines of, okay, I feel like I get where you're coming from. I feel I feel like I get where you're coming from. So, and then an internal dialogue person may say, I'm processing this. I'm processing it. I'm figuring it out. So we have 4 different styles of thinker here. Now we hear it's the same basic concept, regardless of who's saying what. It's the same concept, but if you don't say it back to that person, to them, you're not listening. You're not hearing them. You're not seeing what they're trying to show you. You're not feeling what they're feeling, or you're not processing the information the way that their data is being processed. So the reason we want to think about these things is so that we can start to develop a model and our ears kind of perk up whenever we start to hear certain types of patterns. So if somebody's a visual thinker, they're going to use a lot of sights. They're going to say, see what I'm saying. They're going to use imagery, look, let's map it out, diagram it, paint me a picture, make it vivid, make it in high definition, crystal clear, be transparent with me. All of these types of things are visuals, shiny, colorful, anything like that. This person's going to be more of a visual thinker and learner. And so they may, if you try to tell them what path you're trying to maneuver in order to get from point A to point B, they're going to say, well, can you show it to me? Can you show me, like, can you map it out for me? Can you draw me a picture, paint me a picture? Just show it to me. And so they're not going to want to hear how to get from point A to point B. They want you to show them. So if you're not showing them and you're not giving them the visuals, they aren't going, you're going to be talking past one another, right? The next type of learner is the auditory learner. And so that's going to be somebody, and speaker, and that's going to be somebody who wants you to hear them out. They want you to listen to them. They want to talk. They want to chat. They want to discuss things. They'd like to have an interview. They get happy when they hear the word interview. They want to, they've heard rumors. They would like to remark on things. They would say things. That sounds clear as a bell. Things like that are all auditory thinkers and learners. And if you try to show them diagrams and you try to show them charts and try to show them maps, they just tell me about it. I'd love to hear more about it. Just describe it to me. Tell me about it, because if you're showing me this stuff, I don't get it. I don't, just tell me more. They may be the type of person, instead of, whenever they're trying to get you to listen to them, they may say, listen, 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 listen. If they're a visual person, they're going to say, look, 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 look. And it's the same thing, same concept, but we're saying 2 different things, right? If they're kinesthetic, they feel things. They've got an intuition. They trust their gut. They grasp concepts. They go with the flow. They hold on. They let go. They want support. They stir the pot. They want to touch. They want to touch base. They want to reach out. They're sensitive to situations. And then they rush to conclusions, right? So a kinesthetic person, it's all about feelings. It's my gut. It's this. It's that. And we separate feelings, like if I'm rubbing like sandpaper, to me that's a rough surface. But if you say, hey, shut up, James, you're being rough to me. Now we put those in 2 separate categories. I feel like you were rough, or this feels rough. But really, in our minds, that when we get triggered emotionally, there's no difference between a surface feeling rough and us feeling hurt. These are same to our brain. So a kinesthetic person can take things very personally that really weren't intended to be that way. And so those are definitely people that we want to make sure we're paying attention to their linguistic patterns. Internal dialogue, I like to say that for whatever reason, the accountants and nerds have a tendency to be internal dialogue thinkers, and I'm not being belittling, because I myself am internal dialogue, but these are people that process information. They're logical. They want evidence. They're understanding. They have a criteria. They want to analyze the situation. They'd like to comprehend different markers. They want to reason with you. They need systems. They'd like to integrate things. They'd like to learn more about it, consider it, or realize things. And these are all people that are internal dialogue thinkers. So whenever they say things, they want to say, okay, I'm understanding you, but I need to analyze this so that I can comprehend it. That's an internal dialogue thinker, right? Everything that they're saying is processing. It's like a computer. It has less to do with feeling, visuals, hearing, and it's all about the numbers, the data, right? And so whenever we can actually have a conversation on the same subjects and talk right past one another because of different language styles. One thing I like to do in group workshops is I will say a word, and once I say that word, I want people to tell me what pops into their head. So I'm going to write it right here in chat, and then I'd like you to tell me what it is that pops in your head, okay? All right, as soon as you read it, what pops in your head?
A quack.
A quack. Did you hear it or did you see the word quack?
I heard it.
You heard it. Like, did it go left to right, right to left? Did you hear it? One ear, both ears?
Well, I have some geese that live on the lake where I live, and so in the morning I hear them quacking, and
Got
so
it.
I was both hearing and seeing when you said duck, although they're geese. That's where my brain went.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Um, the reason that I do this demonstration is because every single person I've ever asked has something different pop into their heads. And I like to do this as a demonstration that we're all seeing the same word, we're all hearing the same word, but every single person I ask this has something different. I had a lady attending one time, her ex was a hunter, her ex-husband, and so she had a picture of him pop in her head the minute that I said the word duck because she remembered him hunting duck. One attendee, have you ever seen the movies Home Alone with Macaulay Culkin? Way back, yeah, Christmas movies. So you remember whenever the two bad guys are running up the stairs and he throws the paint cans down over the stairs and it hits them in the face and they go tumbling down the stairs. Well, that's what he saw. The minute that he heard the word duck, he saw that in his head, that movie. So it's fun for me to get to see people's eyes light up and get to realize we all read the same word. The majority of my attendees are English speakers. They all speak the same language. They see the same word, yet what pops in our head is completely different. So imagine how quickly it can go wrong if we're also talking past each other on our terms. If I'm wanting you to hear me and you're wanting to show me, and you're just wanting me to see it from your perspective, but I'm just wanting you to hear me out, and how quickly we can go awry if duck, we don't even have the same duck that comes into our mind, right? So that's one of the reasons why I like to go over these things and try to start to develop a system for us to start to try to hear what somebody else is actually saying, right? So to actively listen, we want to see, hear, and feel. Communication is all about trying to get the sights, the sounds, and the feelings associated with the message. So to actively listen to someone else, we want to check to see if their message is designed for us to see what it looks like, hear what it sounds like, or know how it feels. Almost every single person that you interact with, their message is going to either have one, two, or all of those components in their message, whatever it is they're trying to convey to you. Try first to see, are they trying to get me to see something? Do they want me to hear them out? Or do they want me to feel how they feel? That's the first question whenever we're actively listening to another person. Those are the first questions we should ask ourselves and re-listen to it again and try to see, are they trying to see something, say something, or feel something? And is that the way they're trying to communicate? So that's how we start with active listening. Now, on the other side of that, for active communicating, we still want to see, hear, and feel. So to communicate clearly with someone else, we want to check to see if our message includes a way for the listener to see what it looks like, hear what it sounds like, and know how it feels, both tactile and emotionally. So if it has a feeling that's both tactile, it makes me feel a certain way, like hot, cold, rough, dry, things like that, and or if it makes me feel emotionally about something. Those are all ways that I want to communicate whatever the message is. I want them to hold all three of those elements anytime I can convey a message to another person. I want them to see what I'm trying to say, see what I'm trying to show them. I want them to hear what I'm trying to say, and I want them to feel what I'm feeling, right? So anytime you want to be a clear communicator, make sure that your message has all three of those elements, and you will have a message that is really applies to almost everybody you ever speak to. All right. Now that we've gone over that, do we have a few more minutes or are we getting close?
Take all the time you need.
Okay, all right. So this will be kind of the last section, and this was meant to be brief, so I didn't want to keep everybody here for too long. And all of these handouts and everything, I want you to have. So I did send the PowerPoint presentation and the documents in. I did want everybody to have them, but I know we had some technical difficulties and some things happened, so that's okay. But if you want them, I have them. So this last portion is called mirroring and matching. Mirroring and matching is the final step in being a clear communicator. So what was step one? Step one was creating a clear, well-formed outcome, a goal, using the PURE model. Step two was making sure that we start to listen to the different sensory modalities of others. Are they visual? Are they auditory? Are they kinesthetic? Are they internal dialogue? Focus on listening for those. What are they? How are their language patterns lining up? And then the third step is sensory acuity, looking at their body language, their posture, their tone, and trying to get an idea of how they're communicating to you, not just how they're communicating. So, and that's where mirroring and matching comes in, okay? So one thing we want to do is try to make that other person feel like we communicate in the same way they communicate, so that they can feel vulnerable enough and feel enough trust that we are actually going to listen. One of the ways of being able to develop that skill is through mirroring and matching. We all do it. Mirroring body language is what happens naturally as people bond and develop mutual understanding without even being aware of it. Um, Forms of instinctive mirroring and matching that you're familiar with are like yawning, smiling. I mean, if somebody smiles at you in public and you don't know why, typically, as long as it's not a creep and they're not being creepy, typically we smile back. How you doing? Hi. Yep. I mean, and typically, I don't know if you do this, but I do this. We will respond similarly to however we're greeted. So if somebody is really like, "Hey, how's it going? Nice to see you today," we're typically like, "Hi, hey, how are you?" If somebody's more like just the head nod and yep, yep. And so that's just mirroring and matching. How would you feel if somebody, early in the morning, you go in for your coffee and you're walking through and somebody grabs a door for you and you're expecting the normal, like, morning, and they're like, "Hey, how you doing there today? Good to see ya!" It's like, wow, too much, too much. Back it up, And so we all kind of have this social contract between one another where we do this instinctively. But if you're intentional about it, it can be very powerful. According to research, there's a neuron called mirror neurons, and they affect the part of the brain that's responsible for recognizing faces, facial expressions, empathy. The neuron causes the mirroring reaction when you see smiling or frowning, and it causes you to copy facial expressions that you see on others, but also their mannerisms. Mirroring body language is a nonverbal way to say, "I'm like you and I feel similarly to the way you feel." It's a way of building trust. The different types of social bonding and rapport through mirroring and matching. The first one I want to go over is mimicry, because this is something that I want you to avoid at all costs. It's what a lot of people accidentally do whenever they first start learning about how powerful mirroring and matching can be. But that's like imitating someone or something. Typically, it's what little kids do whenever they do monkey see, monkey do. They repeat everything you do. Everything you say, they repeat it verbatim, and it gets annoying, right? It's insulting. If it's in mirroring, if you're not successful at executing it, it can appear insincere and it can appear and come across like mimicry. So what we want to focus on is mirroring and matching, not mimicry. And so we'll focus a bit more on that next. But we've got to learn what it feels like to be in rapport. And I think all of us kind of do. You know when you've been in conversation with someone and over the course of time, you guys just kind of both start to have the same body language. You're kind of sitting in your chairs the same way, and you just kind of flowing with the conversation. Nobody has to really, there's no agenda, but you just feel comfortable with that person. That's rapport. That's whenever you feel good. You have no reason to leave this person. You trust them. They make you feel good. So those are what we kind of want to try to accomplish through intentional mirroring and matching. So mirroring, on the other hand, is the behavior or skill in which one person subconsciously or intentionally parallels the physiology, the gestures, the speech, the patterns, the body language, the breathing, the attitude, all of this of another person. So if you are able to mirror those things, but not mime them, not verbatim, but mirror them without the observer, the person you're with, knowing, uh, it's really, really powerful. So one of those can be like, if you were to wave at me and you're not doing the Miss America wave, right? But you're doing like a genuine like wave. Typically mirroring is me mirroring that back to you, that same type of wave, right? Matching would be where I do the same thing, but instead of using the same hand on the same side and mirroring in the same way, I do the opposite hand. That's matching. So I'm doing the similar gesture. The subconscious mind doesn't even notice that it's not the same gesture. It's similar enough. So that's whenever we talk about mirroring and matching, we want to focus on being similar enough, not identical. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's not identical to what somebody does. Mirroring is more identical. Mirroring is whenever you are intentionally trying to match that person's gesture, body language, tone, something like that. Again, you don't want to make it mimicry, but there can be times when it's really powerful. One time I asked her if her past, and this may not make sense to everyone here, but we had a long conversation, and she was talking about her past, and something about her past bothered her. And I asked her through a series of, this wasn't just, it sounds nonsensical if I just say the question, but we went through a series of questions, and I asked her, does your past have a shape to it? Does it have any type of shape? And she was like, well, it's kind of like, I don't know. And I said, is it kind of like a sphere, but I was doing back to her, as I was talking to her, back to her, that the motions of her hands, identically to how she was doing them. And that was able, rather than the word, she saw that I was getting the hand gestures right. And so that mattered more to her than the word. The word didn't matter. It was that I was getting the same concept. And I said, now that you mention it, does it also have a position? Does it seem like it's kind of over here? Because I noticed that she was doing, yeah, it does. It feels like it's here. And that was just a way of her being able to process and treat her past like a concrete thing. And it's a technique that we use in neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis. But the point is that the gestures, I mirrored them exactly, and that meant more than the word. So whenever we're intentionally mirroring, we're doing it for the purpose of comprehension, trying to understand what that person's seeing or conveying. So it could be through a gesture, or it could be through a tone. One of the ways I like to demonstrate this is if somebody were to say, like, well, I don't know if you're a musician, but we have every good boy does fine. It's like the way to learn the notes E, G, B, D, F. Every good boy does fine. So that's how you learn the notes. Well, one of the things that we could do is place a different emphasis on every word. Every good boy does fine. 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 So by every single word, if I change the emphasis, it changes the entire meaning. So by listening to someone and focusing on which words are they emphasizing, where are they putting emphasis? And by you starting to put emphasis in the same place that they are putting emphasis, that's another way of mirroring and matching back to them. So they say, well, typically I don't do that. So whenever you say typically you don't do that, what do you mean by that? So I've mirrored not just the word, but also the tone, right? So a lot of times this type of mirroring and matching can build rapport so rapidly. But what it will do is, rather than you sitting inside of your own head waiting to formulate your response, you're spending the majority of your time focusing on what types of words are they using? What types of tone are they using? What types of body posture do they have? And while you are focusing on what message they're trying to communicate, they will feel that. They will see that. They will see that your intentionality on trying to comprehend it from their perspective. And that is the most powerful way to establish rapport and a bond with somebody else, is for them to really believe that you actually care. Because I promise, if you actually care, you will be able to utilize these practices and these skills very rapidly and be able to implement them in your conversations, and they will quickly be able to demonstrate to those around you that you are listening, that you are taking an active role in this, and you are participating, and they won't even know why all of a sudden that they are more drawn to you and drawn to talking to you, but they will just feel connected to you, right? So those are the things we want to do. What do you want to mirror? Language, words, gestures, and movements. Sorry, my clock's going off. And tonality, the intensity, the pitch, higher versus lower waves. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this going on. What do you mean you're not doing that, right? Cadence, the speed. Oh, I would never do that, right? If somebody has that cadence, try to match it. Now, when you say that you would never do that, what do you mean by that? Right? So we're matching that cadence, the timbre, the quality. Do they have a quality to them? That booming, whatever. Posture. How's the body position? Do they have a tendency to sit forward and are really involved and engaged with this conversation, or do they have a tendency to sit back and they're more reserved? Try to mirror that. Try to mimic that and try to give the same. And once you start to establish that rapport, you'll start to notice how easy it is to begin to lead. So if they start off being reserved and being pent up, and you do the same, and after a little while you start to establish rapport, you can notice that if you just kind of sit forward a little bit and you start to engage more with your posture gradually, you'll notice that they start to come toward you. But quite often that starts with you intentionally mirroring them first. Breathing. What's the pace of the breathing? What's the location? Is it high in their chest? Is it low in their abdomen? And what's the intensity? Are they breathing fast, like hyperventilating? Are they breathing slowly? Does it change whenever they talk about different subjects? When a certain subject comes up, do they start to breathe more intensely? You can start to notice these things and start to pick up on all these things. Micro expressions, eyebrows, the mouth, the eyes, the unconscious tells. That's what poker players, magicians, all they rely on these things, is to be the little things that you don't notice that you're doing. And quite often, just by mentioning them, and not in a way that's accusatory, but just saying, I kind of saw something there. What did you have a feeling there? It seemed like your mouth kind of twitched there, like you were disgusted or kind of annoyed. And I could be wrong, but did you have something that kind of, you felt something there? I've found quite often just the mention of it, just mentioning the micro expression, I will hit on something very deep, something that was just subconsciously there. They may not have even noticed had I not been paying really close attention. Personal space, distance between as dictated by the physiology. Some people do not want you in their bubble, and that is the fastest way for you to tick them off and make them not want to be around you and not trust you. So one of the first things is personal space. I like to try to make sure I give as much personal space as possible, and we can't be too safe anymore anyway. So personal space is big. Physiology, the mannerisms associated with emotional states. You can normally kind of tell if somebody's depressed, sad, and I don't mean clinically depressed, just your normal, typical depression, sadness. You can tell when somebody's happy, upbeat, had a better day. You just want to kind of pick up on that stuff and pay attention. If somebody else has had a really bad day, even if you haven't, it's not cool to rub your good fortune in the face of somebody that feels like that they are having the worst day ever. So that's another way for them to distance themselves from you and try to find someone else to talk to. Emotional state. And an emotional state is just a meta model of reality. In other words, it's how we're viewing the world right now through our eyes. An emotional state isn't necessarily true, but it is true to me right now. And so we want to honor that truth, right? Here's one that sometimes people have a problem with. Cultural generalizations, assumptions, and biases. Sometimes I will mirror and match somebody else's cultural generalizations, assumptions, and biases temporarily, just to make sure that I am clearly identifying that other person's opinion. And I don't have to adopt them. I don't have to believe them. I don't have to take them on. But I try to emphatically get my mind wrapped around their position from their perspective. So I'll do that. And quite often I'll walk away and be like, oh man, I am so glad I don't believe that. But during that conversation, I allow that person to run with their general assumptions and biases so that I can get a clear understanding of how they truly believe. It will help me in communication. And sometimes those things are things that I believe that are going to be detrimental to others. So I do try to gently and lovingly help correct and move toward a better assumption, idea, generalization, or bias, or a more positive, a safer one. But quite often, I will just spend those first few times just clearly trying to get an idea of how this person truly believes and sees the world, and without judgment. And that's really hard to do. But it is something that I think if you really dedicate yourself to, you don't have to take it on, but it will help you communicate clearly and understand someone better. So, all right. Okay. One quick takeaway. So, if all of this seems too overwhelming and it seems like it's too much effort to put into a conversation, then I'd like for you to take this one thing away. If you don't remember anything else, just remember this one thing. It's called parroting, and the last three words. Parrot back to somebody the last three words you hear them say. If you can't focus on staying on track through the whole conversation, just parrot back the last three words. So if you have trouble with identifying someone's preferred sensory modalities, just use this simple trick. Repeat the last three words someone says to you in the form of a question. So, James, are you suggesting that I ask some form of a question? See, so I said, repeat the last three words someone says to you in the form of a question. So, James, would you suggest asking some form of a question? So I use the last three words, some form of a question. And so you can do this with just about anyone. If they say anything, you say, oh, so are you saying blah, blah, blah? And you just ask the last three words they said. And without fail, that person will assume that you're listening. And it's just a neat trick. I do encourage everyone to try to focus on learning, on actually listening, but it is a neat trick for you to start to begin to let that other person know, if nothing else, I'm listening to your last three words. Okay, so I call that the last three words of parroting, and it's an easy way for you to try to kind of get ahead. Remember, these techniques are to enable relationships to grow through active listening. If anybody wants to schedule a consult with me, they're free. You can go to james@jamespesh.com, or jamespesh.com has all of my information. You can contact me directly through there, and my business number and all that. But do you have any questions or anything about this?
I don't, but I'm just really kind of excited thinking about the first part of your presentation with thinking if people are auditory, visual. I mean, I hear myself saying that all the time. Oh, I'm a visual learner. I need you to show me. But trying to decide how another person might communicate better with me if I consider that they're kinesthetic or auditory or visual. I never thought of that before. So that was a really great takeaway. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
for everybody who's on here, I'm going to post um, the the things that you were emailing me, the worksheet and the PowerPoint. I'll post all of that to our Youth and Family Facebook page. And
Perfect.
that way, I think people might have a good time kind of practicing some of the things you taught
Yeah.
us today.
Yeah, and if anybody needs assistance on filling out any of those worksheets, they're real short. They're real. Once they've been explained to you, they're real simple. But if you have any problems with them, just email me. I'm happy to help anybody work through those. They're supposed to be for self-help, and it's not helpful if you don't understand how to do it, right? So I'm happy to help explain that stuff. And one takeaway, something to practice if you are really interested in focusing on what type of thinker, what type of speaker someone is. Your favorite show, take 3 minutes, and I'm not kidding. Set a timer, take 3 minutes, put on your favorite show, and every single word that's uttered, write it down verbatim. And at the end of 3 minutes, rewind it and see how close you got. And what you'll find is that we all do this. We have a tendency to, the minute we hear something, our brain condenses it down to a summary rather than verbatim, because we've got so much information coming in. Our brains have to do this. We don't have a choice. It has to just make that all that information, it chunks it down into this little bitty summary so that we can process the information in our way. And so what happens, even if you're watching your favorite show, we don't catch everything verbatim. We catch it and then we shrink it down immediately. And so I do this, and people will be fascinated. But what happens is it helps us become better active listeners when we're speaking to someone else, because we're like, oh, we don't listen as good as we think. And so we start to listen. So, yeah.
James, can you give us your email?
Yes. It's just my name, james@jamespekh.com, PESCH. And don't do this as much full time as I used to, of course, with the pandemic having hit and everything. But I'm really excited about getting back out there, and I love doing this. So please reach out to me.
Oh, well, thank you. We really appreciate having you today. This was educational and fun, and you are definitely not a boring speaker. So,
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate
it was great. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
You too.